The first or second half of 2023 and the first 3 months of 24 were months that were very trying for me personally. As I think most of you know, August 4th be a year that I had my left hip replaced. At the same time, AFib was plaguing me. I think it was plaguing me prior to that. I just ignored it. And then let's say the bottom fell out. My legs were kicked out from underneath me, and it wasn't a pleasant 5 or 6 months. There were times when I felt so bad that it was okay, that if God allowed me to go to sleep and hopefully be resurrected, the first resurrection. There were those times when, life became very tough. It was a struggle. And, God got me through it, as He always does. And feeling so much better now. I'm glad He did not take me up on that thought that it would be okay to go to sleep. But growing older, brethren, isn't easy, and it can weigh heavily upon our mind. Because, as I said, it is going by, time goes by so very quickly now. And I don't know if it's our age, the day and age in which we are living, when we're so busy. But I remember as a kid, when we were in school, first grade through 5th, 6th grade, it was eternity sitting in that classroom. And, we couldn't about bear, going to school and sitting in that classroom for so long. Then high school came. High school came and went pretty fast. And then when graduation came, oh, look out. The doors opened up and time just swallows us up. It goes by quickly. And I've been struggling. I'll be honest with you. My sermon is going to be more of a heart-to-heart today. Because I've struggled for the last couple years of growing older and slowing down when that has not been who I have been, my whole life. Whole life, going to work, enjoying what we do and getting after it and getting things done. And now slowing down to the point where, it was really having a toll on me, my attitude, and so on. And finally, maybe God sent it or whatever, but it came across my phone, an article about the blessing of growing old. It's not the blessing of being old. Well, I guess that's a blessing too. It's the blessing of growing old. That life is a cycle. That we are never intended to stay young. That as the years pass by in this physical life, that we learn, we grow, we have family, we do things, we the cycle of life, and that's was hard for me. It was hard for me to slow down. But then when I read the article, it changed my perspective in growing old. And that's so. I'd like to turn to Ecclesiastes to begin with in verse 1. Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 1. It says, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king of Jerusalem. He says, vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit has a man from all his labor, in which he toils under the sun? One generation passes away, and another generation comes, but the earth abides forever. So that is the cycle of life since the Adam and Eve, that, we have a physical life. We labor. God has created us to work 6 days a week, and we are to labor. Whatever our job is, we are to go out and do it and give our best, put our heart in it, and perform. That's what life is about. That's what God has given us. But in the same token, we realize that life, as I will be 65 in 6 months, and that's young compared to some. We got some in their 80s and 90s. My mom's 92. But still, we see that, my dad has passed away. Our grandparents are gone. One generation comes or passes away and the next generation comes. And that's the way God has made it for the 6,000 years of mankind. Ecclesiastes 3. Ecclesiastes 3 in verse 1. To everything there is a season. Solomon realized that. There is a time for every purpose under heaven. There is a purpose for our being. There is a purpose for this day that we live in. There is a time, in verse 2, a time to be born, and there is a time to die. And we should not be afraid of death. What I'm afraid of is missing out. I got a lot of life to live yet. There's a lot going on. And I remember my uncle was 90-some years old, and he sat there and sobbed and said, I don't want to die. And yet there is a time. There is time to be born. There's a time to die. And there is that time that when it will come to all of us, there's going to be that time when our life is over. Again, that's the way God has made it. But we shouldn't let that get us down. We should be grateful for every day. We should look forward to every day. We should have every day as a new beginning. As the sun rises, we should be thankful for that day and to move on. In James chapter 4, James even lays it out there for us. Man, life. What's life all about here? Life. In James chapter 4 and verse 14. Whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow. James chapter 4 and verse 14. For he says, what is your life? What is it? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. He tells us how quickly life will go by. And boy, has it going by. It's a flash in the pan. But he understood. It's like as a vapor. We're here for a little bit and then we're gone. But our purpose, we have a purpose. And that purpose for our calling, that purpose is we know that this is a temporary dwelling. We know that life is short. In Psalms 90, let's go to verse 90 in Psalms. It's kind of funny that I think Mr. Munson at camp used this. I think Mr. Lowe might have used a couple scriptures there that when he gave his sermon last week that I was thinking about. We think of our sermons way ahead of time, scriptures we want to use, and we know that there's going to be several sermons before ours, and that someone might get into what we want to talk about. Psalms 90. And we'll go to verse 1. He says, Lord, you have been, or a prayer of Moses, the man of God. Lord, You have been our dwelling place in all generations. Both the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world. Even from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You turn men to destruction or to dust, and say, Return, O child of men. For 1,000 years in your sight are like yesterday when it is past, and like a watch in the night, you carry them away like a flood. They are like a sheep in the morning. They are like grass which grows up. In the morning it flourishes and grows up, and in the evening it is cut down and it withers. So we grow. Life, we grow, and then we grow old, and we start to wither, and things don't work as well as they used to. In the morning, and verse 7, for we have been consumed by your anger and by your wrath. We are terrified. You have set your iniquities before. We have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your countenance. For all our days have passed away in your wrath. We finish our years like a sigh. The days of our life are 70 years, and if by reason of strength, they are 80 years. And I know people, like I said, that are in their 90s. We had a lady that we had farmed her farm for many years. She lived to be 106. I had a great-grandfather that lived to be just shy of 102. And so God is just saying that, 70 years and, by good health and maybe living, we can get 80. And boy, if we get more than that, my father-in-law is 85 in 3 days. He's out working, probably like he was 60. and just doing great. And that's what keeps him going. He's out working, out doing things. There's a purpose, there's a reason there for the life. Let's finish verse 10. Yet your boast is only labor and sorrow, for it is soon cut off, and we fly away. We know, who knows the power of your anger? For as the fear of you who is your wrath. So teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. So God is telling us, life is short, but we need to listen to God and be obedient. We have been given an opportunity that no other people on the face of the earth have. We sit here today as a chosen people by God, not because we're anything, but we are the weak and the base things of the world. But he has called us for a purpose of relying upon him, being loyal to him and his way of life, developing perfect, holy, righteous character, that we may someday be counted worthy to be a part of his family. So let us gain that heart of wisdom. Let us understand that our days, they are numbered. And let us be loyal, and let us have a heart of loyalty, certainly to God, as our days can and will draw near. Hebrews chapter 9. A couple more scriptures here on our mortality. Let's see, Hebrews chapter 9. And if we go to verse 27. Hebrews chapter 9, verse 27. And it is appointed for men to die once, but after this, the judgment. We are going to die. This flesh and blood is going to cease to exist someday. But the wonderful thing is God is going to give us an opportunity. Hopefully when that trumpet sounds, that we will rise to meet Christ in the air. But we're not going to do it in this physical body. We'll do it in the new body. But this body will die. It is appointed. It is appointed by God that we will die. Psalms 144. Go back to Psalms 144. Verse 4. Or 3. Let's start in verse 3. Lord, what is man that you take knowledge of him, or the Son of Man that you are mindful of him? Man is like a breath. His days are like a passing shadow. That's how quickly life goes by. It's just the way it is. That's the way it's designed to be. We are here for only a moment. Ecclesiastes 12. Let's go back there real quick. Ecclesiastes chapter 12. Ecclesiastes chapter 12. Starting verse 1. Remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult days come. In our youth, when we lived at home with Mom and Dad, life was pretty good. And then we grow up, we go to college, or we go to whatever, we get a job, and then we find out what the real life is about. We take on responsibilities, and we start our adulthood in life. But he says, remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult days come, and the years draw near when you say, I have no pleasure in them. While the sun and the light, the moon and the stars are not darkened, and the clouds do not return after the rain. In verse 6, remember your Creator before the silver cord is loosed, or the golden bowl is broken, or the pitcher shattered at the fountain, or the will broken at the well. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. So he's, in a manner in which he is speaking here, he's talking about, the will broken. I mean, the body wears out. It's, my rotator cuffs, they ache, they're wore out. My right hip is wore out, but I don't want to get it replaced right now. Thankfully my knees feel pretty good. And so I do what I can do. But it's hard to sit back and just have other people doing things. It really is. That's never been who I am and who I was in life. It's getting in, getting the job done, doing whatever it takes to get the job done. And it's hard. When I have to ask Tim Ellertson, have to ask my son or the others to do it, it's difficult. I don't take pleasure in that. Chapter 4 of 2 Corinthians. Chapter 4 of 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians 4. In verse 16, let's start there. Therefore we do not lose heart, even though our outward man is perishing, yet the inward man is being renewed day by day. Our spiritual part of who we are, it should be renewed day by day. Yes, the old man is perishing. Our physical body is wearing out. But we should be renewed every day in the Spirit of God, in character. For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory, while we do not look at the things which are seen, but look at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporary, but the things which are not seen are eternal. Yes, our old bodies, they are temporary. And they ache, they moan, and we go through that cycle of life. Well, I know that, like I said, my attitude of growing old was really poor, and when I finally ran across that article, the title of my sermon today is "The Blessing of Growing Old," because we can look at our life selfishly. If it's all about us, brethren, it's going to grow old, and we're going to be miserable. Because growing old can be such a blessing for others. Yeah, our aches and pains, we don't like that. But that's okay. That's a part of life. It's a part of life. The blessing of growing old. I'd like to turn to Proverbs real quick, and then Mr. Scarborough is going to put up some pictures here. Proverbs chapter 16 real quick. 16 verse 31. The silver-haired head is a crown of glory. If it is found in the way of righteousness. And here, the crown of glory is passing on the knowledge of our next generation. Picture here is my son Josh at the mint still. I used to run the mint still by myself. The next picture is the two grandsons working out in the mint field, putting mint in the mint wagon. There, they're trying to hoist the door up, and just getting out in the field and learning. Here is Brian Loper. He is learning, for his dad is teaching him well. He's doing the spray painting, following his dad's footsteps of being a painter. Mr. Loper's teaching his son. And here we have Mr. Wayne, his 4 generations of family, his father, him, his son and grandson. The wisdom that is there is, we can't, when that wisdom is gone, we're going to miss something. You can't replace it, is what I'm saying. And it's the grandfather, it's the great-grandfather, it's that hoary head that passes on knowledge and passes on wisdom of life. It passes on the things that we have learned so that the next generation, our family, our kids, our grandkids, we can spare them of going through some of the heartaches of life. Like I said, Josh, I used to run the mint still, by myself when I was a young man. And then it got harder and harder. I got slower and slower. And finally, Josh had to take over. He is the young man that I was back when I was a young man. But I pass on the knowledge of that mint still to teach so that he doesn't have to go through the hard things that I had to go through. The grandkids, the grandsons out in the field, and they were only out there one day. It can be dangerous out there, but teaching them a work ethic. You teach them. You are the example. You are the one that puts forth that example of life and everything that pertains to it. For those that know Miss Faith Ellertson, She was out there. Her brother copped out and went to adventure camp. Adventure camp isn't anything compared to doing mint harvest. No, I'm kidding. It's tough. But mint harvest is tough. You ask Mr. Ellertson. But we had there Miss Faith Ellertson. If you would have saw her, it was so funny of how dirty she was, out there. But she was out there with her dad made her get out there. And she was out there working. And I give her credit. And her poor legs, she showed us last night, they're bruised up and from hitting the tongues on the wagons when she was trying to hitch them up or whatever. But anyways, it is a great joy. It is a great joy when our kids can come in and pick up where we're leaving off. Brethren, all of us work to make a living, absolutely. But we also work hard because we want our next generation not to just give it to them, but to show them the work ethic and how to be successful. Mr. Ben Carson, Tucker Carlson had a podcast. My wife was listening to it, and he was interviewing Ben Carson. What made Ben Carson so successful is that he said, you have to work hard, make yourself so valuable that they can't turn you down or turn you away. You're going to be so valuable to that company or to that person that they want you and that they will pay you to be there. And those are the things that we teach our children. We teach them. I taught Josh about relationships. You build relationships with your neighbor. You help your neighbor when there's times of need and help. There are things that we do. And when people quit, several of them will come to him or me and ask if we will take over their farm. But it's about building those relationships. It's about carrying on. And it is a blessing to grow old and to give that crown of wisdom to our children. Leviticus chapter 19. I'm going to talk about growing old, and of course, and what God says about it. Let's go to Leviticus chapter 19. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 32, I believe. You shall rise before the gray-headed and honor the presence of an old man, and fear your God, for I am the eternal. So God is telling Israel, you give respect to the old guy. I've had a head of white hair for almost 20 years, so I didn't expect anybody when I'm 40 some years old to have that respect. I mean, I'm just one of the guys, and even today, all I do is want to give. I want to give, and we all do. All the older guys. I know they do. Mr. Wayne, has taught his children how to run the business that they have. Mr. Mike Loper doing the same thing. He is giving opportunity and teaching his son Brian to the basics of being a professional painter. It's not going out and buying a gallon of paint and a paintbrush and just swapping up and down painting. There is an art to it. There is a professionalism to it. And Mr. Loper is teaching Brian that professionalism. And that's what we're there for. That's what the gray hair is there for. That's what the bald head for Mr. Loper is there for. So anyways, God does say to honor the old guys. I don't feel I'm that old yet, even though maybe numbers say I'm starting to get there. But I'm just one of the guys right here, just one of you. And Job. Let's go to Job. Let's go to Job. I'm going to go to Job chapter 12. Job chapter 12. And I will go to verse 12. Job chapter 12, verse 12. Wisdom is with aged men, and with length of days understanding. So that's what Job understood. Wisdom is with aged men. And so we want to pass that along. Now, sometimes we do things that we shouldn't do. Mr. Cryer was playing with matches and gas and got burnt. He can't help it. He's 80 and still doing silly things, but well, he's 11 years from being 80, so we'll call him 80. The point is, Mr. Cryer taught a lesson, for good. Even though he suffered that burn, and I talked to him this last night and this morning, and he did suffer, he taught us a lesson. Don't play with gas and matches. Okay, he thought it was something else. It was oil or something. But if it's in a red can, a lot of times it's going to be gas. So, anyways, I'm sure Mr. Cryer, when he turns 90, will have it all figured out and not play with gas and matches. But anyways. In Proverbs chapter 17, if you turn there, please. Proverbs chapter 17. In verse 6. Chapter 17 of Proverbs, verse 6. Children's children are the crown of old men, and the glory of children is their father. I cannot tell you what it does to you when you have grandchildren. For those that do have grandchildren, you know. Thankfully, we have 3 grandsons that live just about 600 feet from us. And they give me the greatest joy of life. And when they call up to ask if they can spend the night, Grampy, can we spend the night? Absolutely. When it's 8 or 9 o'clock and they're Grammy has made the beds on the floor, they don't want to sleep in a bed. They want to put blankets down. They want to watch TV and be in the living room and sleeping on the floor. 8 o'clock rolls around. We're hungry. So Grammy or Grampy gets up and we get cheese and crackers with something to drink or maybe some ice cream. Those kinds of things, those children of my children, and those who have that know what I'm talking about. And what a blessing that it is to have them. And when Josh had his first boy, you know how we relished in that. And then when the second one come along, I told my wife that, you know what, it's time for you to retire. We got boys to help raise. Your influence on them kids is going to be irreplaceable. And it has been. If I would want a grandmother, I would want my wife to be my grandmother. She is that good to those kids. We have 2 granddaughters 4 hours away. My wife will go up. I don't go up as often. I don't get to see them as often as they live in a suburb of Detroit. But they're 4 hours away. But many times my daughter will ask for her to come up, and she's right there. She's going up to be with the granddaughters. Just a week ago, our granddaughters were down. Our daughter and granddaughters were down. And they just have the best time of their life when they can come home, come out on the farm, ride and drive the golf cart, experience the good life out on the farm. And it's a wonderful blessing for us, and it's a blessing to them to get out of that city, that concrete jungle, and to come and enjoy the country, to come and enjoy their other cousins, the 3 boys, to enjoy going to Toto for breakfast. Little things like that. It's a wonderful gift. You know, I remember when I was a kid growing up, my grandparents on both sides were farmers, but on my mom's side, the maternal grandparents, they lived just 5 miles down the road. But I remember such fond memories of them. And I could probably go on for hours, as I'm sure that some of you can with your grandparents and how they were. I remember spending the night with them. We would go to bed early, but we were up early, up before the light even. I remember my granddad sitting in his chair reading the paper before the sun ever came up. My grandmother was out in the kitchen in her steel metal little pot, whipping up pancake batter to make us pancakes and bacon. Always our grandparents providing for us. I remember how hard they worked. My grandmother always had a garden. And she hoed that garden. She watered that garden. You know, their work ethic was unbelievable. She was one of 14 children, being the 3rd oldest. So she helped raise 10 more children. 11. So she knew how to work. I remember she would make her homemade noodles. Homemade noodles, what you do is take flour and eggs, put them together. You make she rolled it out like a pie crust, you know, and she then would put it on the bed and let it dry, and then she would cut her noodles, the homemade noodles. I remember about 3 years ago, I don't know, for some reason, I got this craving for custard pie. And my grandmother, she made excellent custard pie. And I asked my wife, I said, would you make a custard pie? And she did, and it was good. But it wasn't quite what I remember my grandma's. There was a little something missing. So she baked another one. And there was still a little something missing. And I think she did it a third time, and they were all good. I loved them. But I finally found out, it hit me, what it was. See, back in the old day, they used lard. They didn't use Crisco. They didn't use olive oil. They were poor. They used lard. And that is the fat from the pig. You boil it and you boil that fat to make lard. And that, I believe, made that difference, that taste, that lard, that I remember 50, 60 years ago that they had. I think that was the difference. And but anyways, it was they were good pies. My wife's an excellent cook, and I, like I said, I appreciate her efforts in trying to copy that, but she wasn't going to use lard. Back in the old day, my grandmother and her brothers and sisters, the story was that they actually took lard sandwiches to school. They would, on bread, homemade bread, just spread lard on there like butter. And that's, what they would take into school and have for lunch, a lard sandwich. That is, that's not good. But anyways, that's what we remember. That's what, our grandparents passed on. The knitting, the quilting. There was never hardly a time of sitting in a chair just watching TV. They were always being productive. The quilts, the knitting that she did to make afghans and different things. It was a different generation, but still those things passed down to us. My grandfather, he traded his horses in for his first tractor in the early 1940s. His first tractor. They came out and got the team of horses and delivered a tractor. And when he quit in 1970 due to bladder cancer, his last tractor, it was a nice tractor for that day and age with a cab on it, air conditioning. It didn't have auto steer. They didn't have auto steer back in them days. But it was a wonderful tractor. It was an old International Harvester 806. I know it didn't mean nothing to you. Some old people it might, but anyways, the point is that we learned the work ethic. We learned what to do and not to do. And I was so young, I remember checking the oil on the tractor when the tractor was running. Got oil all over myself. You got to shut the tractor off, and then check the oil. Well, I was so young, I didn't know the difference. But anyways, I learned. I remember my grandparents' love for us kids. I remember when we were out in the field and we were planting, we were just very young kids. I was 12 years old when we started our own farm with my two brothers. And my grandparents, we'd see the old green Chevy pickup coming down the road. And we knew Graham and Gramps was coming. And what did they have? They had homemade cookies for us. And they had a mason jar, a quart mason jar, full of ice and water, wrapped in newspaper to keep it cold. And that's what we drank. That water out of that mason jar. Eating our homemade cookies from Gramps and Graham. Those are times that we'll never forget. There are times that have impacted our life for the better, for the good. That's what the hoary head does. He should be doing, is making that kind of impact upon the younger generation. My oldest brother was always the one who ran the planter, the corn planter, the bean planter, because he was a perfectionist. And when you plant, you got one opportunity for the whole season to get it right, and you better get the planting right. You better get it done. Because if you don't, the whole growing season and the harvest season is not going to go well if you do a terrible job. So anyways, my brother, like I said, was a perfectionist and always did a great job. And when our farming operation grew to where we needed 2 planters, my son Josh took over the planting, and he learned from my brother. I didn't do the planting. I did the field preparation, and in the fall of the year, I did the harvesting. But my son Josh would learn how to plant from my brother. And Josh always, my brother always said, get the seed in the moisture. No matter how dry it is, you got to get the seed in the moisture or it's not going to germinate. And then you're going to have different germination stages in the corn, and then yield reduction starts because you got different plant heights. There's a method behind the madness. And Josh always plants to moisture. Always. Those are things that we learn from the hoary head. I don't know, where was I now? I got to get back to scriptures here. Oh boy. Like I said, I could go on forever to about learning the wonderful things in life. Glory. Psalms 127. Let's go there. Psalms 127. Psalms 127. Let's see. Psalms 127, verse 3. It says, "Behold, children are a heritage from the eternal. The fruit of the womb is a reward. It's like arrows in the hand of a warrior. So are the children of one's youth." And so our children, brethren, are our heritage. They are our posterity, future generations to come. And that's why we do what we do, to assist our children, to help and train them, to teach them the ways that where life doesn't have to be hard. Honestly, it doesn't. We make it hard by the stupid things we do. When we're 18 years old, we know more than mom and dad, right? We go out and do stupid things that can haunt us for life if we would only listen. And the thing about grandparents is, it seems like that the grandkids a lot of times will listen to the grandparents. The grandchildren will listen to the grandparents. We are there to raise our family in that manner where they don't have to go through those stupid things. In Deuteronomy chapter 4. Deuteronomy chapter 4. Let me see here. Deuteronomy. Yeah, I'm going to go to chapter 4. Just go to start in verse 1. It says, "Now, O Israel, listen to the statutes, the judgments, which I teach you to observe, that you may live, and go in and possess the land which the Lord God of your fathers is giving you." What's God say? Listen to the statutes and judgments which I teach you to observe them, to obey them. That what? That you may live. That you have life. And you can have it more abundantly if we will only listen. He says, you're not to add to the word which I command you, nor take away from it, that you may keep the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you. Verse 5, "Surely I have taught you statutes and judgments, just as the Lord my God commanded me, that you should act according to them in the land which you go to possess." He says, "Therefore be careful to observe them. For this is your wisdom." You want wisdom? Then listen to God. Obey. Study his statutes, his laws, his command, and his, statutes and judgments and his laws. If we want wisdom and your understanding, wisdom and understanding in the sight of the peoples who will hear of all these statutes and say, "Surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people." Wisdom comes from God's law. It doesn't come from a science book. It doesn't come from things that, or from man's teaching, from man's philosophies. It comes from God's law, and that never changes. For what great nation is there that God is so near to it, as the Lord your God is to us, for whatever reason that we may call upon his name? And what great nation is there that has such statutes and righteous judgments as are in this law which I set before you this day? He says, "Only take heed to yourself and diligently keep yourself, lest you forget the things your eyes have seen, unless they depart from your heart all the days of your life." Brethren, don't let those things that we see, don't let them be gone. Don't forget them. Don't close our eyes to God's law that makes life full and rewarding. "And teach them to your children and to your grandchildren." So that's what we are to do. We are to teach those things that make life fulfilling and rewarding and long life, God says. And that's what we are to do as an older generation, as a hoary head. In Titus, let's go to Titus chapter 2. Titus chapter 2. Titus chapter 2. I'll start in verse 1. "But as for you, speak the things which are proper for sound doctrine, that the older man be sober, reverent, temperate, that he will be sound in faith, in love, and in patience." Those are the things that we are to emulate. That's who we are. "The older woman likewise, that they may be reverent in behavior, not slanderous, not given to much wine, teachers of good things." The older women are to be teachers of good things. They are to set the example, that they may admonish the young women to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, to chastise homemakers, and the homemakers, good, obedient to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be blasphemed. So the old man and the old woman, the older ones, we are to teach. We are to be teachers of good things. And that's what God expects from us. You know, you think of the storybooks and things when you grow up as a kid, and it just came to mind the other day. I said, you know what? Even Little Red Riding Hood and went to see Grandma. You know, it was Grandma's house that she went to, because Grandma's house is a special place. It is a place. It should be a place of peace. It should be a place to come and have fun, to enjoy Grandma. Those are the things. I want to read a statistic. Or first of all, I want to read an article, Why Grandparents Are Essential to Young Children. The University of Oxford completed a study that shows some key links to the role that grandparents play in the lives of young children. This large-scale study looked at how grandparents are involved in the upbringing of the child, as well as the role of a grandparent plays in a child's overall well-being. Excuse me, Smith. We know from science, and we don't need to know from science, we know from experiences in life, but they got to put their science thing in there. We know from science, from personal experience, and from common sense. Yeah, there you go. They finally got it. From common sense, that grandparents can be invaluable. They can be an invaluable asset to the upbringing of younger children. Grandparents today tend to work longer and live longer. Many are family-focused people dedicated to values and principles refined through a lifeline of learning. With the rising number of single-parent families and those where both parents hold down full-time jobs, grandparents' roles can be of immeasurable importance in the day-to-day life of a child. The study finds that grandparents play a high-level role in the emotional and the behavioral development of children. When grandparents are present, children have fewer emotional problems, and they are less likely to be involved in negative behavioral situations. Grandparents' involvement helps children in a number of ways. For example, they often help in the development of children's problem-solving skills. When family disruption occurs, grandparents can become a stabilizing force for young people. In times of turmoil, including after loss of a parent, a grandparent can provide the material and emotional support, reducing the complications a child might encounter. In short, we know that emotionally healthy grandparents contribute positively to the well-being and overall development of their grandchildren. The Oxford study shows just how important the role of grandparents are. I remember when my middle brother was killed, and he had two daughters that were just 9 and 11, and I know the impact that my parents, their grandparents, had upon those two girls. I don't know if those two girls where they would be at today if it wasn't for my parents taking them, sheltering them, helping them through the tragedy of losing their dad in a tragic accident. Grandparents play such a tremendous role in the upbringing of our children, our grandchildren. In another, I think this is by the Census Bureau, Older women are essential to the U.S. care infrastructure. Not only are they disproportionately concentrated in many paid caregiving occupations, but they provide crucial unpaid caregiving as well. Perhaps nowhere is this more evident than in the prevalence of children who are being raised by a grandmother. In 2021, there were 2.3 million children, 3.2% of all children in the U.S. that were being raised by their grandmother. There were 1.3 million that were being raised by a grandfather. They were being raised by 3.7 total percent were being raised by a grandparent, meaning the child was living with at least one grandparent who was responsible for most of their basic needs. All told, almost 2.1 million grandparents are raising their grandchildren, 1.3 million women, and 757,000 men. For most, this has been a long-term commitment. 84.7% have been doing this for at least a year, and almost half, which is 48.8%, have been doing so for 5 years or more. But that is the importance of Gram and Gramps, Grammy and Grampy, or whatever your grandparent name may be, Donnie or but anyways, you know, for those that may not have or be a grandparent, you don't know your influence in interacting with young children, the impact that you have upon them. You know, our camp, the youth camp in Texas, I cannot say enough of how just that camp is run. Mr. Munson, Mr. Fritz, and everyone involved, they run the camp of the world for youth. Nobody compares to their youth camp. And everybody involved to be there. The older generation that have no children, that have no maybe connection, but they want to be there to help, to serve, to volunteer and give of themselves to make that camp successful for the youth of the church. You will never know. You will never know the impact that you have on these children. You know, brethren, our children have a target on their back. They have a target. Satan is targeting them. And we, as adults, we have to protect them. We protect them by teaching them, by loving them, caring for them. We teach them God's way of life, as God said in Deuteronomy 4. Teach your children my commandments. If we do not take the opportunity, whether we have grandchildren or not, I implore you to be an adoptive grandparent. Adopt grandchildren in the church. Because if we don't take care of our children, our grandchildren, Satan will. He will provide for those. He will provide those who will harm and hurt our grandchildren, our children. They are targeted. And as we as parents and grandparents being responsible for our children and grandchildren, we have that obligation to protect them. We have that opportunity and that blessing and that gift. And it is. It is a gift. It is a gift to have them. I would not know what to do if I did not have all of my grandchildren. But I see my grandsons, like I said, every day. When we get up in the morning, first thing I do is I kiss them. I say good morning. I kiss them and tell them I love them. And I am asking about them. My youngest grandson and I, Cole, had our first little excursion together. He's just 4. But we had a lot of rain, and I tried to get away for a few days to go down to camp. And his 2 brothers were down there, Wyatt and Walker Joe, Wyatt David and Walker Joe. And I'd like to thank Mrs. Blanchard and Mrs. Wilsbach for doing such a good job. They all do a great job, but boy, doing the mini campers, that's tough. And I commend certainly Mrs. Wilsbach and Mrs. Blanchard and those that help, those ladies for just doing an excellent job with the mini campers. Where was I going with that? Oh, okay. So I wanted to fly down to camp, and so youngest grandson wanted to go along, and so it was Grampy and Coley's first trip together. So that night we drove down to Indianapolis. We had to stop at Chick-fil-A. We had to get a milkshake. and those things, but we got a room. I think we got in about midnight, and so anyways, Grampy, would you scratch my back? So I scratched his back until he fell asleep. That is a nightly ritual, even at our house, back scratching. But we got up the next morning, went to the Indianapolis, Indiana airport, got on the jet, flew down to Dallas, and where our wife picked us up to go down to Athens to camp. And he just had a ball down there. He just loved it. He didn't want to come home. Even though Grampy would take him to Chick-fil-A on the way home, he didn't want to come home. So we flew back to Indianapolis during the day and drove back home. We're a couple hours from Indianapolis. But that would be our first time together. And to enjoy just him and me. He was sleeping. He had his head cocked around deep in the pillow, and I took a picture and sent it to his dad or mom. And but those times, you can never ever replace. They are wonderful times, and we need to take advantage of them and do our best. Brethren, in conclusion, Mr. Scarborough is going to put one last picture up. That's me and Coley in the tractor going down the road, and I don't know what we saw off to the left, but we were both looking off to the left. And my son Josh was behind us, and he took that photo and he put it on Facebook. And I had a neighbor who was a farmer also saw it. He sent me that picture because I didn't know it was on there because I'm not on Facebook. But there it was. He sent me the photo, and under there he said, "This is what life is all about." And it is. and the impact that it has on our children, or I mean on our grandchildren, is immeasurable. Brethren, growing old, yeah, we have the aches and pains and we hurt. But there is so much that we can give, so much that we can offer to our family, even to friends. I hope that for us that are growing older, that we can look at life in a positive way and that we can leave a positive result for those who will come after us. Let aging become a blessing to you.
For more information, go to our website at cogassembly.org. Copyright 2024, Church of God Assembly. All rights reserved.